Hello and welcome to Illuminating Primary Care, brought to you by Menlo Recruitment. I'm your host today, James Trustwell, and I'm joined by David Clark, Managing Partner at Mendip Vale Medical Practice, a 6-site practice serving 70,000 patients across North Somerset and Bristol. Welcome, David.
Hi, James. How goes it today? Almost the weekend, and you must be happy after a Sheffield United win.
Indeed, I am. So we're here to discuss how a smallish practice in a village in Somerset has grown to become what Mendip Vale is today, which is the biggest GP partnership in the Southwest and one of the biggest partnerships in the UK. So, David, first of all, you joined the practice in 2015. Can you tell me at that point what was the size of the practice in terms of patients and number of sites, and how does the whole operation differ today?
Well, it's been a really interesting journey over the last sort of 6-7 years. So I was fortunate to join just as two small practices, 8,000 and 11,000, decided to merge. They've worked together for quite a while in a federation, but were mindful that whilst federated gave them some options of working collaboratively, working together, it didn't give them that what you get from merging, i.e. you are really in it together. So I think they were really forward thinking. It was a perfect opportunity to join. So I joined in the October 2015, just as the two practices were coming together on the merge date. And shortly after that, we had a vision, if you like, to continue growing with like-minded practices. So we took on another practice down on the edge of Weston-super-Mare in Well. That was an APMS contract that had come up for bid that we were successful with. And as we did that, a neighbouring practice was really interested in what we were offering. So we looked at merging with them. Another one fell off the back of that. Another one fell off the back of that. Then one in Bristol. Then one in South Gloucester. So we find ourselves now covering the whole of Bristol, South Gloucester, and North Somerset with a really diverse patient base, 70,000 patients. The biggest change, I guess, is for me, we're starting in somewhere where I came from an acute hospital where you had a finance team, you had an HR team, a facilities department. You had all of those different departments at your disposal, and you come into general practice, and it was me, just me.
Yeah.
And there were no other structures or supports in place, and in some respects it was really enlightening. And you sort of look and think, crikey, I've got a blank canvas to work with some really great GP partners that are really keen to do something different from the norm, but also kind of scary because there isn't another group, department, big team that you can go to ask for help, guidance, or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in that time, I think we've grown really well, and what we've been able to show is that by working at scale, that actually merged, that we've been able to take advantage of the ARS scheme. We've been able to grow, so we've got good coverage during all core hours. We're less impacted by annual leave or sickness as an organisation, and now have what we didn't have when I first started. So we do have people in facilities, we do have people in HR, we do have people in finance, and I think that makes my job easier because I'm now able to, I guess, focus on 2 or 3 things rather than 15 things. And hopefully I'll do those 2 or 3 things better than trying to do 15 things.
Yeah. I think you do more than 2 or 3 things, but anyway. So at the time that you joined, it was the first merger then. So 19,000 patients at that point. So at that point, how many GPs were working for you, or how many partners and salaries, and how many are you in total now?
So there were 6 partners at the time. There were another 6 salary GPs. And now we've moved to 18 partners, 38 GPs in total. The scary thing that I see now is that when I first joined, we had a wage bill of 120,000, 130,000 a month. And Last month's was £725,000,
Yeah.
and we have a team of 300. And I
Yeah.
think the biggest benefits that I've seen is that rather than have one or two, say, physios or one or two clinical pharmacists, we've got a larger team. So they've got that peer support, they've got a lead for their particular specialty. But as a clinician, if you're referring, you're not beholden to when do they work next. You've got the cover all during core hours, so you haven't got to change your decision making because the physio doesn't work on a Wednesday and today's Tuesday, so I can't refer them tomorrow. You've got that ability to keep your referral pathway and the way that you operate the same all the way through.
Yeah.
And it was really evident at the start. We were one of the first to have a clinical pharmacist. We had one clinical pharmacist and 23,000 patients. She went on holiday for 2 weeks, and it was everybody had lost the ability to actually function. And thinking, crikey, having just one of something is really good, but you really notice it when that person's not there. And for that person, whether they're a pharmacist, a physio, a social prescriber, can become quite isolated if you're the only person in that role. Whereas if you've got that peer supporting group, I think it's more rewarding for the post holder. And they're also working for the same organisation. So you're not having to, work at this site on a Monday, that site on a Wednesday, that site on a Friday.
Yeah.
So you're building those relationships and rapport with the team there. And you've got that sense of belonging. And you don't feel as though you're being sort of pushed from pillar to post and not being able to offer continuity because, you're not there for the 4 or 5 days. I think it certainly seemed, I think in terms of feedback we've had, helped us with retention, certainly helped us with recruitment. And I hope has ensured that we can offer safe and effective care because we've got that sort of resilient base to work from. So we've not had to use locums. We've been really fortunate that we've had a fairly sort of solid team. And up and down the country, like everywhere, there are challenges with a lot more demand coming through.
Yes, there certainly is. So you've grown from 2 sites to 6 sites, 19,000 patients to 70,000 patients, 6 partners to 18 partners, 12 salarieds, I think you said, to 38 salarieds. So that all sounds like a lot of work. So why did you decide to grow the practice, and what are the benefits?
I think for me, I was really fortunate to join a practice that was already forward thinking. So had tried federating and said, this is great, and why everything's working well. We're all really, in it together and, standing shoulder to shoulder. But very quickly noticed that when there was a particular pressure, everybody reverted back to their own business, their own team, and realised that there would be far more, I guess, sustainability and security at the end of the day from working as a larger organisation.
Yeah.
But it's been, for me, I guess, a really hard sell for places where GP practices are all technically small businesses. And you're saying that you want to really reformulate that model and turn it into something different. And people that maybe are coming to the end of their career, have got a couple of years left, don't want to sort of embrace that sort of change and see remaining as we are as the best option. And I think with the demand in services, the recruitment pressures, patients' expectations, standing still is just not an option. It would have been nice if PCNs had worked, I think in a few cases they have, but I haven't seen from working as a PCN how people have really, really sort of embraced joined their work.
Okay, that's an interesting comment. The PCNs haven't worked. Of course, as far as I'm aware, so you're your own PCN in North Somerset, and in fact, are you in the Bristol sites as well?
So in Bristol, we've got one other practice in our PCN. So it's Mendip Vale and another practice in Bristol. But essentially, in North Somerset, we are our own PCN. And it's not that we don't want to collaborate with other practices. We just have different sort of pressures and demands on our services that you don't see in a practice with 8 or 10,000 patients.
Yeah.
And quite rightly, that they have a different need to what we have as a larger provider.
Yeah. No, it's. I'm sure, kind of being your own PCN in North Somerset must have its benefits.
There are less
Although I know
meetings, which I quite like. So
less
yeah,
meetings.
less meetings. I don't have to meet with myself, so that's quite good.
Yeah,
But I guess it enables you to get some traction under ideas.
yeah,
So if you're in a PCM with 4 or 5 other practices, they've got different pressures, different issues, and you're trying to concentrate on a change in service or something. It can be very hard to get all 4 or 5 practices in that PCM to be able to spare the
yeah,
commitment to do that. So then you get the
yeah,
frustrations that one practice is moving at a different pace to another. It's not getting the traction behind it. And we do a lot of meetings, a lot of talking, and we're not necessarily able to put those ideas into practice.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Obviously, a lot of decision makers, and I suppose to use the ARRS scheme as an example. If one practice wants a paramedic and the other wants a physician associate, it's potential for arguments and maybe just that elongated decision making.
Well, yeah, exactly that. And different demographics have different needs. And then you get to, the funding is pretty good. However, if you're a practice of 8 or 9,000, it doesn't necessarily buy you a great deal in terms of bodies. But if you pull those resources together for sort of 70 or 1,000, you can then have 3 or 4 physios, you can then have 3 or 4 pharmacists, you can have your own social prescribers, and bringing some of those services in house has been really beneficial as well. A lot of places have outsourced because they don't have the headspace or capacity to provide the supervision for, say, a physio or for a social prescriber, and you're buying that time in from somewhere, but you're not necessarily getting the best value and having somebody who is aligned with your business model.
Yeah.
So bringing them in house, I think we get better value, and also probably that sense of belonging. So you're actually working, for the patients in the practice as a whole team.
Yeah. I guess, they're working to your ways of working as well. They just work for Mendip Vale effectively, although via a PCN, whereas other pharmacists, paramedics, etc., may work across 3 or 4 sites and they might all want something done slightly differently. That type of thing.
And that was, the frustration that I've heard from a few a few roles where they've worked across different sites. That there's a slight protocol or pathway, and then you become, how do I do it for this place? How do I do it for that place? Almost as though you're learning a process time and time again because it's not all aligned. And you may have those relationships with the GP partners on one site that give you, I guess, a freer rein to do different things, that you go into the next site and they haven't really sort of tested you in terms of ability and understanding. So they sort of hold you back on what you're able to do. Whereas if you're in the same place day after day, hopefully you're given that autonomy and that sense of freedom to grow and develop. And I think for every single one of our roles, we've tried to get people to play to the top of their game. So we were the first to have nurses doing coil fits and implants. Why does it have to be a GP? We've got APs doing joint injections. Again, why does it have to be a GP? What can we do to invest in people so they feel challenged, still able to work in a safe way and supported, but able to actually up their game and learn new skills? It doesn't always have to be the GP.
Yeah. No, I agree. So your growth is super impressive. I think alongside just growth, I think the impressive side is the practice obviously runs extremely well. You've got an excellent reputation in the area. I know that firsthand from the amount of GPs and allied health that I've spoken to. Your reputation is excellent. Whereas I think sometimes there can be a misconception that practices growing or bigger setups are bad or not as well run, and maybe not growing as competently as you have. Whereas I know your growth, although it's been quick, you've only been growing when you're actually ready to grow, and you've actually got staff in the pipeline, clinicians ready to take on another site. But I suppose what I'd like to know is how have you grown to the size you are now? What are kind of the ins and outs? Because obviously not everyone's done it. So obviously you have been doing things that many of the practices either have chosen not to do or can't do. So how have you actually grown to where you are now?
I think it's been really hard. Merging is plumbing hard,
Yeah.
and changing cultures, and I think one of the biggest things that we've had to overcome, the challenge really has been you work in a single site in a practice where you know everything and you have that span of control because it's all just on one site and you've got, I don't know, 30 odd people there and you feel, I guess, more in control than if you're on a site, there's 5 others, there's 300 people. But I look at it that I know who to go and ask if I don't know the answer. I don't need to know everything, but I know who to go and find the answer. But for some people, giving up that sense of knowing everything is really difficult. And I think particularly for traditional GP partners, they found that step change probably really hard. Some have embraced it really well and going back to the spinning plates have said, I prefer to have 1 or 2 plates to spin and do it really well than to have 15 and they're all, falling off and causing no end of chaos and sleepless nights. So I think we've given that sense of sort of security and that feeling of that you're in part of a larger, more sustainable organisation, and balance that against feeling as though you've lost some degree of autonomy. But we've been really keen to still ensure for the team and patients that each site is very much its own site. It's partner-led with a surgery manager. And whilst it might not have that same traditional sort of small family practice feel, we've tried to embrace that as much as we can, but underpinned it by good sort of back office support.
Okay, so what would you say the biggest things you've learned either yourself or as a practice during this growth period? Going back to 7 years, if you knew everything you knew now, then what are those key things that you've learned along the way?
You can never do enough around communication. You think that you've given them a weekly update, a newsletter, you've spoken to people, and it still doesn't reach it. You really have got to keep going back out and back out and back out.
Yeah.
And
are you talking about your staff in terms of
well,
communicating with your staff?
Staff and patients. There are so many sort of misconceptions that go out there, and then you think we gave them an update when this was happening, and people are busy, they've missed it, or it's not the right media to sort of to hit them with. That you can never do enough around communication. I do that. I'm sure we've told you that. We probably have told you that once or twice, but actually we needed to do it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And in terms of not being afraid to make a mistake, and my view is nothing's set in stone. So if we merge, there may be a Mendip way of doing things, but it doesn't mean it's the final version. So if we've merged and we've learned something and we can improve what we've done, what we do, happy to change it. It does mean that you're on almost a treadmill of continual change, but there should be no reason why you can't improve what you're already doing. It doesn't have to be, we've always done it that way.
And obviously, so communication is the biggest thing you've learned. But is there any kind of specific biggest challenges that? Well, yeah, the hardest things to overcome kind of in the last 7 years, apart from, I suppose, communication being a broader thing that you've learned consistently along the way. Have there been big challenges where you've thought, how are we going to get over this?
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. I think COVID brought us an awful lot of challenge. I'm not sure how much we've been then able to reflect back on it and say, what can we adapt and change and do better? Because I think we're still fighting for headspace with everything else that's going on. So as well as the communication, the other things that we could have probably done, or if I had my time over again, that we could have done better, was ensuring that we listened more to both patients and the team. And that can be really hard to do because you've got one of me, but there are 6 sites. How do you ensure 300 people will feel as though they've been given airtime or feel as though they've been listened to? And I still don't really know the answer to that. I think we try to be as visible as possible. We have whole practice meetings each month, but we don't necessarily hit everybody all the time. I think for patients, the biggest change has been how we've had to adapt post-COVID with the rise in demand about what we are able to do and be probably less accessible than what we were sort of, at the beginning, sort of 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That level of service just isn't sustainable. And something where you get paid. My biggest learn coming from the acute was that we got paid a global sum, and it didn't matter whether you saw that patient once or 365 times. That global sum didn't change.
Yeah.
And it staggered me. In the hospital, you do the first sort of referral, you get paid. You do a follow up, you get paid. Do an echo, you get paid. Do another test, get paid. And then I came in and I was thinking, crikey, there must be something wrong with this. They haven't quite worked this one out.
This can't be right.
By a travel policy, you can't even go away on holiday for 2 weeks for sort of 90 quid, but for 90 quid a year to provide what we do is and money is not the answer to everything. However, I think that's such a challenge in the current times. And cost of living has increased. Cost of supplies have increased. All of those bits make it more and more difficult to maintain a level of service of 6-7 years ago. And we're against the backdrop of seeing a 20% increase in demand, yet the population's grown less than 3%. Doesn't stack up.
Yeah. And you mentioned about communication before, and you also referenced that there's 300 of you in total. So I suppose ultimately alongside the GP partners, as the leader, as certainly the non-clinical leader for these 300 people, how, I mean, there's 25 of us here, and that's challenging enough. So how do you lead that many people? And obviously I know there's practice managers at each site, but as someone who covers so many sites as well, with so many staff, and I suppose sometimes you've got to be unseen, haven't you? Because you can't be everywhere all the time. So how do you manage to lead? Or I guess you're not directly leading them, but you're ultimately the leader. So how do you do that?
You're absolutely right. You can't be in all of those places all the time. People work part-time, different shifts. And even if you went into every practice once a week, you wouldn't meet all of those people. I think it goes back to what we still want to have as a model is that very much each site is its own identity. So there are partners there, and you should feel as though, although you're part of this larger organisation, for want of a better word, you're that franchise, but you put your own twist on what we deliver for the needs of your patients. So very much for the partners on there, no different from being a partner, I guess, in a single site organisation. You still need to be that visible lead on your site. It's interesting because in the majority of cases, everybody sort of takes that and embraces that. Probably the biggest area that it falls down on is when there's a difficult decision to be made, that people then revert back to, let's go in ask David or head office, because they don't necessarily want to say, we've decided that, for example, when we started doing Saturdays, they've decided we're doing Saturdays. And you're going, actually, as an organisation, we've decided to do this because it's the right thing for our patient population. So I guess that's still a challenge. And the vast majority of partners are very good at stepping up and doing that. But it's human nature, isn't it? If you've got that opportunity to, I guess, sort of duck down a little bit and say, I don't know where this came out from.
So basically, all the difficult conversations lead to you, essentially. That's true leadership, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I've got to say, I think that we have a really fantastic team. And I think that in a world where they do a really, really difficult, hard job, and that's at GP level, at nurse level, at AP level, at reception level, at patient coordinator level, I think we're really, really fortunate to have such a good team.
Yeah,
good. And it's about, hopefully, that we've encouraged that ethos of having that sort of can-do attitude and taking responsibility. And I say to the team that if you go out and you do something that you believe is in the best interest of the patient, the organisation, even if it's wrong, I'll support you. But feel as though you've got that support and autonomy to go and make that choice and decision out there.
Okay.
Still work
Excellent.
in progress, and if I could find a way, as I said, to be out more often and seeing people, I would.
That's it, isn't it? Because I know you've got such a huge responsibility, not just to your staff, but to 70,000 people as well. And I just think it just must be so difficult to be that leader across so many sites, not being that, I know you're based at one site mainly and you cover other sites sometimes, but it must be so hard to be unseen, because human beings have a way of sometimes being, I think, negative and so in terms of staffing, David's a leader, but we never see him. And that's something you could never do anything about. Obviously, I'm not saying they do say that, but I can only imagine, based on my experience of managing and leadership, you literally you can't work enough hours. You can't do everything. It's impossible to be everywhere all the time. And yeah, it's just a really tricky thing to manage.
Yeah, absolutely, James. And I don't think there is a perfect sort of way of delivering that. And we're really fortunate that we have a sort of less than 10% staff turnover rate. I think it's the team have a lot of opportunities to stay with us, grow and develop, so they don't have to move to find sort of progression. But we always look at exit interviews, and it's interesting when you look through, but trying to get something tangible back from it. They say, what could be improved? Communication. How? I don't know, but you need to improve communication. What does that look like? Or you ought to sit on the shop floor, bring a chair, sit in the middle of the shop floor, and wait for people to ask you questions. You go, how do you do that across 6 sites covering everybody?
They won't ask me anything, do they? That's what they want. They want an AMA session.
Yeah, we try to get that at our whole practice meeting each month, in terms of giving people a really sort of transparent view of what we're trying to achieve as a business, what the challenges are, and hopefully answering the questions about, if we can't do something, the reasons why we can't do something. And we try to ensure that the whole team are aware of why we're doing something, not just you must do health checks, not just that you must do this many calls, not those sort of things, but saying why you need to do it. So hopefully people have got the understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and listening in terms of what can we do to tweak and change. I don't think there are any massive quick wins that are going to dramatically change the demand on services or people's working lives, but we can do little tweaks that hopefully make life a little bit easier. A few years back, we put in trolleys into the clinical room that were stocked, and the admin team stocked these trolleys up each week. So as a clinician, if you're looking for something, you haven't got to go in, wander down the corridor for something they don't use that often, or work out where it's going to be. It should hopefully be there. And it meant that you saved a couple of minutes each day, but hopefully they add up to make the hard job a little bit more bearable. Yeah,
that sounds like a great idea. So I just want to ask a question about the sustainability of primary care from an employee point of view. So how do you make primary care and working at Mendip Vale sustainable for your staff, and in particular for the clinicians? Because obviously burnout is on the agenda. Workload has been high in GP for, I don't know, at least 10 years, maybe much longer, and it's likely to peak probably again this winter, I would have thought. So how do you continually make it sustainable, so that you hold on to your clinicians?
Several approaches, and I still don't think we found the sort of final answer, but the inroads into that. So encouraging the clinicians to develop a special interest. So it's great having sort of nigh on 70,000 patients, because you've got that wide enough cohort of patients to be able to develop an interest. So we support people in terms of training and development for a particular special interest. stretching in terms of what they're able to do and undertake. So as I was mentioning about the nurses doing coils, APs, doing joint injections, finding out what interest they have. So other than doing, and I don't mean just doing 6 sessions, but doing 6 sessions of patient-facing work day after day, week after week, it isn't sustainable. How do you mix it up? You can change the template. So, we've got 15-minute appointments and you've got a hopefully something that feels manageable, but how do you make that something that you can do for year after year after year? So what special interest do you want to develop on top?
Yeah.
Because we've had the headspace from being well recruited and working with yourselves in terms of ensuring that we've still got a continual flow of people coming through, we've been able to branch out into other things. So we were able to offer, we've taken on a hotel for asylum seekers. Somebody who's a clinician that's got a special interest does a session down there each week. So I think not only are we providing a great service at that hotel for those asylum seekers, also for that clinician, they're doing something that they've got a particular interest in. We've got clinicians that enjoy doing research, occupational health, doing those other than just being face-to-face, doing normal general practice work. What else can you do on top? Yeah. Tweaking in terms of what do they get through. We've managed to reduce down things like home visits by having a really good team of advanced practitioners. We invested in a couple of cars to go out and bring patients in so we can hopefully make that time more effective for the clinicians. The patient would come into them for same-day urgent.
Yeah, amazing.
Particularly in a more rural area where you could be driving for 10, 15 minutes and you're losing that time. Whereas the patient comes into you, not only do you save that time, but you've got all the equipment. And if you want an ECG, you want a blood test, you can get that done there and then. So you hopefully solve it first time rather than making 2 or 3 appointments. Managing the workload in terms of not continually getting the team to work at 110%. It's not.
Yeah.
It's really hard, isn't it? Because there is, without a doubt, there's more demand out there than ever before, and people continually want to take that, suck up that demand. And it's interesting to see at the moment how much is hitting our lists around dental care, and as other areas of hitting, we've seen it mental health for the last sort of couple of years where there hasn't been capacity. That's become more and more prominent day in, day out. The waits for the acute, now they've gone to up to 104 weeks. Those patients still continue to come back to the GP while they're waiting for that. So you're seeing that demand. But now, as I said, dental patients coming back in. How do you manage all of that and still make this sustainable? Because however much capacity you put in, people want more and more from it. It goes back to how do you make your sort of 90-odd quid stretch to deliver all
your 90 quid. Well, yeah.
It's a mix of, I said, hopefully giving people stuff that they enjoy doing to break up their week, listening in terms of what tweaks and changes can we make to make the day-to-day working life a little bit better. But fundamentally underpinned by having that workforce and not waiting until you've got a gap. We've been since I've started, we've done a continual recruitment process, not because we've had gaps, but because you want to get those people through. So if you do take on, we're doing the infusion service for people with COVID, you've got that capacity. You're not switching a workforce that's already stretched to do something else. So the recruitment underpins having, I think, a job that's sustainable and manageable because you're not asking people to step up. If you're in a practice and there's 4 GPs, one's off on holiday, one goes sick, you've lost 50% of your capacity. What do you do? Do you kick that demand down the road? Do you cancel it? Does everybody do 50% more? How do you manage that? Because we've got a larger cohort, we're able to share that capacity out amongst the sites. So if one site is particularly slammed, you've got the ability to absorb it in the other sites without kicking the problem down the road or asking everybody to work 50% harder, just to maintain what we've got. So I think that has been helpful and meant merging is probably the best option, because you are genuinely all sharing the same resources.
Yeah. So I think obviously the accumulation of the things that you do to make primary care sustainable for your clinicians obviously works, because your staff retention, well, I know in terms of clinicians is excellent. It's certainly much better than the market average with burnout on the agenda. So yeah, the accumulation of those things is definitely working. But what would you say that GPs would say, your GPs would say, is the best thing about working at Mendip Vale?
Crikey, I think that we make a tough job more doable. So I don't think we make it an easy job, but I think we make it more doable. That the financial stability that we've got from working at scale has enabled us to invest in the estate, so you've got a nice environment to work from. We invest in the kit, so you're not chasing around. There's only one BP machine. Those bits that hopefully make it a little bit better in a really tough place. Plus the opportunities, though we don't have a traditional model of partner or salaried. There are steps along the way, and that's worked well for people that want to sort of try. So we do an associate role where you take an area of, say, quaff, or an area of something where you would take responsibility for delivering those services and be an associate GP. That would be reflected in your pay of time to actually do those extra bits. For one of the better word, a non-equity partner role. So before you go into full-blown partnership, the ability again to take on additional responsibilities, try before you buy, see if it, it's always struck me, how do you work out that you want to be a partner? What does it mean? And
yes,
we've also got, I think, in that model, the opportunity as well that we've had partners that have done 15, 20 years that are then able to sort of step back and say, right, I no longer want to be a partner, be an associate, and I'll do my last couple of years enjoying what I joined medicine to do. So it works well both from a moving up, moving back, depending on where people are in their time of life, whether it's family commitments, you need a change, you want to try something, or you try it, you think, actually, that's not for me. All of those bits are in there that hopefully make us a little bit different. Hopefully we've also ensured that each site still has its own identity, so they don't feel as though they're sort of caught up in a large scale sort of corporate environment where you're just a member.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it stemmed from having a good team that we've been able to build from, that everybody feels as though they can come to work and hopefully make a difference.
Yeah, so your structure in terms of the levels for salary GP is unique as far as I'm aware. Having salarieds, then associates, then non-equity partners, then full-blown partners. We've probably recruited for nearly 2,000 practices across the UK, and I've never come across a model like it, and it does just seem to make sense. It does seem logical, like you say. How do you know if you want to do it or not? Well, how do you know if you can do it? And how does the practice know that you'd be a good partner if you don't know until you just suddenly become a partner one day? You're a salaried GP one day, and then tomorrow you become a partner. That wouldn't happen in many other industries. So it has felt slightly unusual that is the normal model. So I think the way you're doing it, it's clearly working, because I know how many of your salarieds have become associates, and associates have then become non-equity partners, and so on. It's clearly working. So one final question. It's just a really easy one. It's what does the future hold for primary care? And what would you do if you were health secretary?
Oh, crikey. We touched on it. Did PCNs change much? So in that vein, will ICBs change much? We can't continue in the same vein, but I'm not sure there's appetite to change, or if people feel as though they've got the headspace to want to change. And for us, it's a really slow burn. When we merge, we don't push anything. It's wanting to merge with like-minded practices that can see the benefits of coming together and changing how you operate. The future for primary care is a really tricky one, isn't it? There's reviews needing to be done. making some unpopular decisions about. I personally feel as though a practice with less than sort of 10,000 patients isn't viable in terms of that economies of scale on that site, for the number of bodies on the site in terms of staff and the financial viability. So it'll be easier to make larger sites in the urban areas, but how do you do that in more rural areas? But the smaller family practice model, I generally don't feel is sustainable. The partnership model, is that sustainable? We've done it differently, as you're saying, not only with the different stages, but in terms of how do we value our buildings, so you don't buy in as a partner an inflated book price of a building. We've done it alternative use for a number of reasons. One is, if you want to change your service delivery, you've not got the possible negative equity of over borrowing for your building. You've not got the issues of newer partners coming in saying, crikey, how on earth do I buy into that? And would I buy into that place so that GP can retire? All of those bits make the current model, I think, something that's not sustainable. In an ideal world, what would I see? I think if GPs were the provider arm of an acute working together and sharing the resources, I think there would be a more sustainable, solid way forward for both patients and practice. I think that joined up working, maybe it will be something that ICBs will bring. But I think whilst everybody's still got their own individual budget, which you quite rightly defend and want to keep, it's going to be really hard to do any change. As health secretary, do you want to do something so radical and disruptive? It's a really difficult one, isn't it? We go around and everything gets reinvented on a slightly different twist to the one that it's not necessarily a radical change. So I've watched a couple of the larger acutes that have worked with GP practices and sort of brought them in. For some of them, I think it's been fairly successful, but for a lot, they've done it on practices that were perhaps struggling a little bit anyway. So they've almost done it on the back foot and made it really hard to show that as a positive. It's going to be up to us in general practice to make the changes. If we wait until it's done to us, we'll probably get something that we're not particularly pleased with, and that probably isn't the best thing for patients. But, if ICBs bring us something, I think that would be the next step. But we may be having this conversation in a couple of years' time, and there'll be a replacement for ICBs. It will say, right, PCNs didn't work, ICBs didn't work. What's the answer? Charging patients to a degree? Would that stem something? Would that mean that people thought about it a little bit more and planned? Possibly, but I'm not sure that even that would be the answer of making a massive change to what we see at the moment. Some of the stuff that we get coming through that's urgent or requires action, you think, well, actually, with a little bit of planning, you could have probably done this yourself and saved a lot running out of medications. Those little bits you think, actually, with a little bit more planning, this could be better. Changing that mindset that you must always see a GP because they know everything best. How you need to embrace the right clinician, and it probably won't be a GP to get what you need. But all of those bits, it's so difficult, James. I don't think there's any straightforward, easy answer. For us, we want to continue to merge and grow, so I think we can be the best at what we can in general practice. But the next steps for us would be looking to say, how do we manage some of the other pathways, some of the diagnostic pathways? Can we get to a size where we can have our own diagnostic units, so we can actually stop the waits on that, and we can improve outcomes and get better results quicker for our patients? That could be the next step. But we can't just sit back and wait for it to be done. It's something we've got to progress ourselves.
Yeah. And to do that, presumably you'd have to be over 100,000 patients, would you?
Yeah, I think that would be the next sort of logical step. And as I said, working with practices that hopefully see us as an opportunity and not as a threat. Hopefully, we can change the the large-scale corporate Mendip Vale isn't actually that. It's people in general practice wanting to do the best thing for patients and the team that work within them. But I think that's certainly work in progress as well.
Yeah. Okay. Okay then. Well, thank you very much for joining me. You offered great insight, but you've got 300 people to manage and 70,000 people to take care of. So I should probably let you get back to
You
work.
wouldn't see me because I never get out of my office. So.
No, exactly. All right. Thank you very much. Cheers, David.
Take care.